Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books. What a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together. What a yummy snack. PBJamz. Yummy books and music. PBJamz. Reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz. What a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz.
Good morning or afternoon, PBJamz peeps. We are so glad that you are here with us whenever you're joining us. I'm here today with Laura Sperry Gardner, who is the author of Blue Ridge Babies, which is kind of a music book and a counting book and an animal book and so many cool layers all pulled together into one really lovely book. And so we're going to chat a little bit about that today, and we're glad you're here joining us. And Laura, thank you for being here as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Nice to see you.
Yeah, so fun to be connected. So my friend Carolyn, who is an author she lives over in the western part of North Carolina, she sent me Laura's name and said, you two should connect because she has this really cool book that's animals and it's music. And so we did that. And so we're here today to chat a little bit about Blue Ridge Babies. So to start off with, Laura, just talk to us a little bit about your inspiration for this book and maybe the process of writing it and the publishing journey that you went on to get this book published.
Sure. So it started actually quite a long time ago now that I think about it. I think it was probably about, maybe about 2016 when I started thinking about this book. And it came from my family and I went on a trip on the Blue Ridge Parkway. We do live in the Blue Ridge Mountains, but we wanted to actually drive the parkway and camp along the way. And so we spent about a week one summer doing that. It was really lovely. And so it started from that, but it's also based on a folk song that's already out there that most people know called Over in the Meadow. And so what I did was I took this version of Over in the Meadow that was familiar and well-loved, and I transformed it with different animals. And I used the animals that are native to where I live to place them into the story. At the time that I started writing this book, I was a children's librarian. And so I was doing story times. And part of that was that I also learned how to play the ukulele at that time. And I was using that to play and sing during story times and puppet shows and things like that. Just absolutely a ball. Just loved it. So as part of that, I started to branch into learning how to take things that I had written and put them to tunes, poems and things. And I decided, well, I'm going to turn this into something at the time thinking I'm just going to use this for story time and that's it.
Right.
So around this time is actually when I got to know Carolyn. I was interested in getting published and trying to write, and she is, and it still is, I do believe, the leader of a children's writers group in Brevard. And I was seeking some kind of group like that. I wanted people who were also interested in publishing. You get a lot of positive feedback from friends and family, but it's not always informed feedback. Right. And so I really wanted to connect with a community of like-minded people that were trying to do the same thing. And so through this group, I got connected, and we would meet periodically and have critiques. And then something that came from this too is that we all joined the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Our regional chapter is the Carolinas. Yeah. And then we as a group decided that we were going to attend a conference in the fall. So part of this conference, I decided, I really want to get this manuscript. I want to do something with this. I had so much fun writing. At the time, I was calling it Over in the Blue Ridge. And I had a friend who was an artist, and I was like, hey, let's just do this. Let's do a little self-published project. I got this thing that I like, that I wrote, and you can do the illustrations, and we'll just put something together. It'll be fun. But even though I knew I was self-publishing, I still really wanted to hold myself to a very high standard. And so I set it up to get a professional critique at this conference. And what I was surprised to find was in this critique, the person that I spoke with, she actually was like, why aren't you trying to get this published? And I was like, oh, I don't know, should I? And she's like, yes, this is really good. And so it was her encouragement that, you know, sort of inspired me to try and do something more with it. And so as a sidebar to this, I had also joined some different Twitter groups and things like that in order to connect with other writers. And it was during one of these, it was PB Pitch, that they periodically, the industry will do these pitch parties where what you do as a prospective writer, you know, you're looking for an agent, you're looking for a publisher, there's a certain day when if you use that hashtag that the agents and the editors and everything, they're looking actively. And if they like your tweet with that hashtag, it's an invitation to submit. And so that's what happened. I put out a blurb mentioning Blue Ridge Babies, mentioning the region, and I had someone like my pitch. So I got in touch with her. You know, I sent an email and I went through the querying process the way that many of you probably are right now. And the connection there was that the person that liked it, it wasn't even for her per se. She knew that a colleague was from that region and had been looking for something that was a picture book about the Blue Ridge for many years. Wow. And so she actually kind of switched me over to the colleague. This was with Page Street Publishing, Page Street Kids, I should mention. And I looked into Page Street. You know, we kind of did the back and forth where you're doing the querying process. And amazingly, I just kept getting green flags as I went through each little stage. I looked into them and the contract and everything. And one of the things I really liked was that they were an independent publisher, but they're distributed through one of the big five, through Macmillan. And so it's sort of like the best of both worlds, where you have this small publisher who they wanted a lot of like writer and illustrator input. But they also had that built-in distribution from one of the big five. And so I decided, like, yes, this is the journey that I want to take. What I was really surprised to find was, for one thing, I could not bring my friend with me, my illustrator friend. It's just not how the industry works. I pitched it that way, but they were kind of like, no, thanks. We want to be able to pick our own illustrator. And so I talked to my friend about it, you know, and she was okay. She understood that this was a real opportunity for me. And so she's like, yes, you know, you've got my blessing, move on. So I did that. And then I got to have some say in who the illustrator was. There were 3 different illustrators to choose from, and it just happened that we all liked one of them equally the best. That was the style that we all really liked. And her name is Stephanie Pfizer Coleman. I've never met her in life. I've never had any interaction with her. That's not how it works. They usually kind of keep the writer and the illustrator separate. Those are 2 different things. And basically they did, you know, pay me for my words up front. But what I was surprised about was how much revision happened. It is so interesting to me that there are just these 2 names on the book. It's my name and the illustrator. I know there are so many more people that were involved in this process. For one thing, it seems like in the industry, the person who's like the editor is the kind of entry level position where you get a lot of turnover. This is what I have learned over time, because in the time of when I got the contract to when it was published was about 2.5, 3 years. Right. I had several editor changes, and even the head of the publishing company changed during that time too. And every single time a change happens, you're just hoping that doesn't mean that your contract is going to just be negated, you know? Yeah. So every time you're just like, it ain't over till it's over. I hope I make it through. And so, you know, in that process, I had to actually revamp the entire text. I had written it based on rhyme. And one of the big things that my first editor wanted me to focus on was making sure that, I don't know who's familiar with this book, but it's the kind of counting rhyme where each verse there's a different animal and they have a certain number of babies. And so you start with 1 baby, then 2, then 3, all the way up to 10. And so they wanted to make sure that when we get to 8, 9, and 10 babies, that those are the number of babies those animals can have. And that was actually very challenging. Because first I had to do some research. I found out a lot about these animals, their habitat, when they're born, where they live, all of these things. And, you know, and in the end, once you get, and if you ever looked at this book, the reason that it's fish and salamanders at the end is because when you talk about 9 and 10 babies, that's where you got to go. Before that, I think number 8 might be squirrels. Again, you're thinking about rodents. So you got to think about animals that reproduce in big numbers. Right. And so finding the rhymes that would match up with those numbers was actually kind of challenging. One of the things that I had fun with was the vocabulary. I think of myself as a poet. That's, I think, my strength. And so I'm all about that exact concise word choice. And I think that makes it kind of an interesting book. People pick it up and they see Blue Ridge Babies 1, 2, 3, and they're like, perfect baby shower gift. And I'm not saying it's not, it's a good one, but it also is a lot more advanced than it might seem because of that vocabulary. Some of that vocab is a little complex. And then when you add in, there's some material at the end with nonfiction facts about some of the babies in their childhood. I think it kind of extends the life of the book so that if it were given as a baby gift, they might still even enjoy it up to 6, 7, 8 years old, you know? So.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that's what you want, is you want those books that they can come back to and want to listen to again, and then want to read on their own. And so, yeah, that's lovely that you were able to work in all those layers. Awesome. What a great story. It's really not, I think this episode is going to air actually after that, but PB Pitch is coming up actually at the end of this week. So yeah, the 27th, Thursday, as a matter of fact, just a couple of days. So I was actually working on my pitches before I came on the meeting with you, trying to get some things ready to go. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about the musical connections, and I love that you're playing ukulele and you were using those in story time. That is so awesome. So much fun to work music in with young kids, because it just helps so much with the reading process. And it's just a really nice segue and a nice little building block for their reading, as well as being just a lot of fun, and kids just naturally kind of gravitate to music anyway. And so we know that this was based on a folk song. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about the musical connections in the story?
Sure. Yeah, I can share a couple more things there. So one of the things was the musical connection was very important to me. And there were a couple of places when I was getting this book published that I had to kind of fight for it, right? And that was one of them. I really wanted that the score to be in the back of the book. I wanted it to be really clear that this was a song that families could sing along with. And so I actually, in order to make that happen, I have friends who were very musical, and I had a friend who helped me to create basically like the sheet music that appears in the book. And that's what I sent to the publisher. And without very much change, other than I think the color behind it, it's the sheet music that I created. And I think if I hadn't done it, they might not have included it. So I'll mention that because I had the software through this friend to do that. And because I really just insisted.
Yeah.
I'll mention too that with the promotion, I had a lot of fun with this because I'm an okay singer. I'm okay for story time, but I have friends who were professionals at this. And so I got a friend who's a professional, who's also a mom, and she's got this lovely voice. Her name is Nikki Talley. And so I asked her to perform and record it for me. And then I had a different friend who's really skillful with media. And so he took basically digital images from the book, and he kind of created like, I guess you'd kind of call it a slideshow, but it's really just sort of panning around the different pictures and kind of making it appear as though they're moving, even though they're stationary, you know? Yeah. And so we paired these things together. And part of when I released this, which it was in, I should mention, it was published in March 2020. So that should tell you something there. But part of the promotion when it came out, it was a lot of digital stuff. And so that was one of the things that we did. And it's still out there on YouTube. I think I have it linked from my author page, which needs to be updated. It's not complete yet. But anyway, so that was something else that was really fun too, kind of creating this multimedia part of it to enjoy the music. And I think it is important for this book. I think you have to enjoy it as a song. I think you're missing half of it if you don't do that. So
yeah, and that's a great point. We talk about that a lot in the writing world, about how the text and the pictures come together to make a full and complete story. And then it wouldn't be complete. That's what makes it a picture book. If it would stand on its own without the pictures, then it's not really a picture book. And if the pictures would stand without the text, then, they're not both really needed. But for this one, like, that's a great point, because it's actually kind of a tri-bond, because you have the illustrations, you have the text, but then you also have the tune, the melody, the music that goes along with it. And the fact that it's a a well-loved folk song, you know, just adds another really beautiful layer. As a music teacher, I think, you know, those are really important, those songs that have been around for a really long time. And, you know, but kids love updated versions. Like I've been reading a lot of fairy tales and folk tales with my music students this year. And almost invariably, like we've done the Three Little Pigs, and this week I'm doing Pig, Pigger, and Piggest. I don't know if y'all know that book, but it is the cutest thing. Do you know that one, Laura?
Yes.
I love
I'm
that
just working
book.
in the children's section. I'm familiar with a lot of children's books.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I love Pig, Pigger, Piggest, and the kids, you know, they'll always choose the modern one over the traditional one, almost always. Last week we did I shared Lynn Marie's Goldilocks and the Three Scares as a, you know, as a counterpoint to Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, I've kind of been pulling some Halloween related, you know, kind of fun stories. And so, but they love having those things that they know, but then having them updated in a new and fun and exciting way. So I think that's just really another lovely layer that you were able to put in there, with it being that folk song as well. What would you say was the most you've talked a little bit about the challenges already, but what would you say was the most challenging, or maybe flip that, and maybe the most interesting part of the process?
Let's see. Well, I mean, I think just well, for me, it's going to sound kind of silly, but the title actually, I mentioned how I had called it Over in the Blue Ridge, and to me that seemed like a no-brainer because it's the repeated refrain in the song, and I had it set in my mind that that's what that book is.
Yeah.
And then I think I mentioned how the publishing company, they had a change in the head of the company, and during the time that I was kind of waiting, you know, while the illustrator was, the reason it took that long is because they wanted this specific illustrator. They had to wait till she was available. So anyway, when that happened, the new head of the publishing company, he didn't like the title. And he was very insistent that we needed to change it. And for whatever reason, that was just a real stumbling block for me. It's not that I was unwilling to do what he asked or anything. It was more just, I really couldn't think of anything else. I just couldn't think of something that was somehow better. And it was to the point, I think they thought I was being difficult because my editor like scheduled like a Zoom call with me and the head of the company and her. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm not just trying to be difficult. I just can't think of anything. And I don't know if it was the motivation of the fact that we were going to have this meeting, but as I was on my way over to my desk to like boot it up and have this meeting, it just like hit me. And I was like, oh, I know what to call it now. Yay. And that was Blue Ridge Babies 1, 2, 3. He really, really wanted counting in the title. Part of it had to do with how they were going to market it. And he really wanted it to be clear this was a counting book. He saw that as the big selling point. And so once we kind of agreed on that, it fell into place. But I think of anything, that was the most difficult, just because I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to cause problems, but I just couldn't think of anything better. Yeah, but I would say, yeah, that, and just maybe the uncertainty as it took, you know, I think it was about 2.5 years, just each time some change happened and it was in a new editor's hands and that kind of thing, you just keep hoping like, oh gosh, I hope that it goes through, you know. I hope something doesn't happen, something doesn't change where they decide to table this, you know.
Yeah, well, and I think too, with it coming out when it did, like that's right when the pandemic kind of, I mean, really spiraled. So do you find that really affected the sales and the marketing? I know you said you did a lot of digital, electronic stuff.
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, normally I would have been doing a lot of author events. As it was, I've still done some. I would say they've been kind of a mix of virtual things, kind of like this, even through like local bookstores and stuff like that, regional bookstores. I've done a couple of in-person events, especially locally. You know, my community is real supportive, and they, you know, like my local bookstore loves the book. They're like, it's a tourist town, and they're like, oh my gosh, we've needed something like this. You know, because people come in wanting to get that gift book that's regional, and so many times those regional books are like kind of more self-pub and maybe there's a variance in quality and stuff like that. So they were, you know, they were really excited and really supportive. And I think normally I would have had like a really big event with them, but as it turned out, it was kind of a smaller event. And I continue to do smaller events as people ask me for them. So I guess it has changed it in that way. One of the things I thought that would be a good selling point for my book is the whole Blue Ridge Parkway piece and the tourism piece, and how that connects. So I did go around to different places. I queried through email, and I created a lot of digital media along with that. But I also went places too, and gave them a copy of the book, or gave them a one sheet that I'd created that had information on it. Basically, just trying to promote it to places where I thought it would really sell well. It's hard to say if that worked or not. I don't know. I did just get for the first time, it's actually just today, I got like the report about my royalties, and I haven't quite got to the point where I've earned out my advance yet, but it's getting really close, which to me is encouraging, because I think a lot of our authors don't ever earn out their advance. That's fairly common. So
yeah, that is great. I was just reading about that the other day, that I mean, a large percentage of picture books don't ever earn out. And I mean, they're very expensive to produce, and that's why, publishers are very selective as well. So that's a lot of kudos for you right there. It was selected, it was published, so many really cool things that happened to make that all come together for you. I didn't have this in the list of questions, but I know that, so I'm in North Carolina as well, and I've had mixed feedback from stories that have a regional feel or a regional reference. Like some people will say, take that out, keep it as generic as possible. You don't want to, identify the region, because that makes it less marketable. So I thought it was encouraging to find one like yours that has been, mainstream published. Were there any hiccups with that? Did you get feedback along the way that said, oh no, you should make this more generic and less regional?
Well, I was kind of lucky in a way. I didn't query a lot of places before this. I got lucky. I got really lucky. I'm gonna say that with, I got this pitch out there on the PB pitch, and then I queried, and that one said yes. I didn't have to do that whole process. And I think the reason they liked it, at least the initial person, was that Blue Ridge focus, which is a rare treat. I got the impression through the publishing process that you're right, that they don't go for things that are too regional, because they're trying to make it widely appealing so they can market and sell it.
Sure.
I think this one is a little broader. When you think about what people call the Blue Ridge Mountains, depending on how they define it, it can extend all the way up to New York. And I think that was a little bit of a help. This particular publishing company was based in Boston. And so, it helps if there's some piece of the region that you're talking about that at least is relatable to the people who are buying it. And in the case of that very first editor, she was from, West Virginia. She had this connection to the Blue Ridge. She was delighted. But had she not been the one, I don't know if it would have happened. I really don't. I think I just got kind of lucky that way. And that's why every time there was a new editor, a new change, I was so worried. I was like, oh gosh. Yeah. Because that person that initially loved it for that wasn't there anymore. That being said, though, I will say I was a children's librarian. And so I was very, very familiar with the market. I was ordering the new books. I was seeing and evaluating the new books all the time. And so I had a very clear sense of what the market was like and what was out there. And I had a very clear sense of what Page Street Kids was doing too. And I knew that they would be a good fit for me because I'd seen some of the books that they published. I'm thinking about one in particular, and this is when they very first started doing picture books. There was one about Oliver, and he is a redwood tree. It's an actual tree that exists in I believe it's in the Sequoia National Forest on the West Coast, but this person had personified the tree, and there was a whole story around it. And so that book in particular made me think this is going to fit with what they're looking for, because they had something that was like that. It's like, yes, this is sort of specific to this one tree in this one national park, but there's enough of appeal there that, that it's going to have this broader audience. I had seen some other stuff they had done too with different animals. The one I'm thinking of in particular, I'm sorry, I don't remember authors' names on these. I just remember the publisher, but there was another one called Contrary Creatures. And I was enchanted with this book because it was about opposites, but it was also telling you all this like factual nonfiction information in a picture book format with all these different animals. And so there were these different aspects of that publishing company that I knew. I was like, okay, I think if I have a chance with this book with anybody, it's going to be with these guys. So
right. Definitely a case of right place, right time, right person, right book, we talk about that all the time. Like that's just kind of how it has to happen, right? You can be a great writer, but if you don't have that right book at the right time, and if the right person doesn't see it, then it's not going to happen. So
absolutely. And I don't want to mention this too, because I know you're going to ask me about what's coming next. One of the things that was an added benefit was in my contract was that, they wanted to have what they call first refusal for my next manuscript, which is a really good thing. It means if you have something else you want to publish, show it to us first. I did not have any takers on any of my other pitches, even though they knew me and they knew that I had this book, I had the best shot of anybody. They just weren't the right thing. And I know reading the things that I submitted, I'm like, I know these are good, but I also see that they weren't necessarily sellable. And that matters. It's like they're thinking about, how can I sell this? They're not thinking, is this good? They're thinking, how can I sell this?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and I think they were just too
yeah.
long. They were too long. They were too whatever. They just weren't right.
Yeah.
And I don't have any other publishing deals in the works. I don't. I just haven't had that thing that I've produced that I knew was good enough yet. It just hasn't happened. So
yeah. And again, it's not about good. It's about right. It's not about good. I think it's about right. And and that formula just has to, it just has to happen, and then it has to land in the right place. And it's why you can query one person and it's a no, and you can query another person and it's a yes, because it made that connection. And so, yeah, well, that's just part of the process, right? We all have to, we in the query trenches and in the writing, and I mean, even with critique groups, like we deal with that all the time, rejection and passes, and that just not quite right, not quite the right thing. But man, we know that you've got some good stuff in you, and we know there's more stuff to come. Just hasn't landed right. Yeah.
I'm kind of on a different path now is the only thing, though. I mentioned I'd gotten a different job. And so within my library, I'm now in the local history librarian, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, cool.
This is another passion of mine, and it is a step up in my career. And so I'm very excited. But it does mean I'm not as in close contact with children's books and literature as I once was. So when it comes to what I might publish or do next, it might be a children's book. I did enjoy doing that. That was a lot of fun. And I think I have some skills and knowledge that would help with that. But at the same time, I may end up wanting to write some things about history. This is my path now. And, it's just sort of the way that things happen. So we'll see what's next.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to see whatever it is. We know that it's going to contribute greatly to what's out there, whether it's adults or children's or whichever direction you decide to go. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to tell us before we wrap things up? Anything that you've thought of that you want to share?
I think just the thing I would really emphasize is, gosh, I got so much out of going to that conference and the membership that I had in the SCBWI. The things that I learned not only about writing and editing, but about the publishing process. It just really helped me, I think, and to understand the industry, the process, what they're looking for. And it's a whole other skill set that's different than writing. So I would just really emphasize, like, any chance that you get for professional development and connecting with other professional or aspiring professional writers, like to do it. So
yeah, that's a great tip, actually. Really important. We just had our fall conference just a couple of weeks ago, actually, for SCBWI Carolinas, and it was wonderful. And you're right, that was one of the things I came away with, was just thinking I have a much broader understanding of how the publishing industry works from sitting and listening. And I think even if you listen to interviews like this, it's great, but I think seeing I don't know, there's just something different about being face to face and person to person and hearing them talk, and the inflection and the way, just everything about that just gives you more information. And it's just much, I think, a much clearer definition of what's needed. I definitely came away with a clearer picture. So I think that's definitely a good tip. Well, for the viewers and listeners, Laura's giving away a copy of Blue Ridge Babies 1, 2, 3. So make sure you leave a comment on the blog. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you go to the blog and leave a comment there. Or if you're catching snippets of this on Twitter, make sure you go to the blog, leave us a comment, and Laura's going to sign a copy and get it out to the winner that we'll announce at the end of her episode's time on the blog. So thank you, Laura, for being with us today. It's been such a fun conversation. I told her I always love being able to highlight North Carolina authors, and especially when it's North Carolina content as well. So just a really fun book, no matter where you live, no matter where you are. It's a delightful book. It does have all those lovely layers. And just a reminder that you can support the authors that we host here on PBJamz and other platforms that you're seeing. You can make recommendations to your library, to the children's librarians like Laura was serving, to please get this book in the library. You can leave reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. You can just recommend by word of mouth. You can buy them as those baby gifts that's going to grow with the child. So just make sure that if you catch this book and you love it, make sure you support Laura in all those good ways. Get the books into libraries and into kids' hands. And we thank you for joining us today for another fabulous episode of PBJamz, and we will see you next time. Have a great week.
PBJamz, reading, writing, teaching.